Last week, the New York Times published one of the dumbest, most insulting infographics I've ever seen in my life in an article titled 10 Columnists and Writers Rate What Mattered in Trump's First Full Month. You already know from the headline that this is going to be some bullshit, right? 10 New York Times writers want to tell me what mattered, meaning that they also want to tell me what didn't matter. I mean, look, Trump and Elon Musk spent their first month in power completely flooding the world with as much awful bullshit as they could in an attempt to overwhelm the average person and make them feel like it's hopeless to do anything other than comply. And so all anti-fascist communicators have a duty right now to help the general public by breaking down individual actions, explaining them, and helping to brainstorm potential responses. This is not what that is. This is one of the most respected newspapers in the country using a fun scatterplot meme to let some of the dumbest men on the planet tell you that trans people don't matter. They included a few women too, but my God, the men are so dumb that they should be studied by science in another country where science still exists. Just to give you a little taste before I get to the meat of what I'm going to be talking about, Daniel McCarthy, editor of Modern Age, a conservative review, and Matthew Schmitz, editor of Compact magazine, both think that a child who goes by Big Balls has had a large and very positive impact on the United States when he stole a bunch of data and fired a bunch of people critical to the health and safety of Americans. And on the topic of Trump planning to genocide immigrants, Adolf Twinkler and the Thumb are joined by walking bad take machine Ross Douthat in agreeing that that's also good and impactful. And so finally, when it comes to agreeing that trans people really should be punished, those three smooth brains are joined by David French, a right-wing loser who sucks so much that his own church told him to pound sand and then he cried about it in the New York Times. Let me be clear. Everybody sucks here, including the usually on-point Tressie McMillan Cotton. As Alex P. pointed out with this excellent notated graphic on Blue Sky, the only morally correct position here is that Trump's abuse of trans people is as negative as possible and as consequential as possible. Yes, even if you yourself are not transgender. Let's go over what has happened in Trump's first month in office. On January 20th, Trump signed an executive order declaring that the federal government will no longer recognize transgender people by defining sex as strictly male or female based on characteristics at birth. The order requires federal agencies to remove references to gender identity from policies, mandates that government IDs reflect only sex assigned at birth, and eliminates accommodations for transgender individuals in federally funded spaces like schools, shelters, and workplaces. It directs prisons to house transgender women with men, rescinds federal funding for gender-affirming healthcare, and eliminates federal protections against discrimination based on gender identity, including under Title IX. 3 days later, Marco Rubio froze all passport applications requesting the X gender or asking for a change of gender. Trans actress Hunter Schafer reported on TikTok that she needed a replacement passport, not one that needed to be changed at all, and she just got it back marked as male. On the 27th of January, Trump banned trans people from the military. The following day, he signed an order stating that federal funds could no longer go towards trans care for people under the age of 19, meaning that they could no longer use Medicaid to cover treatment. The order also targets hospitals and universities receiving federal funds that provide gender-affirming care, directs the Department of Justice to pursue litigation against the practice, and encourages Congress to pass laws allowing people who received care or their parents to sue providers. It also calls for investigating states that protect access to gender-affirming care and those that shelter patients traveling from states where it's banned. The day after that, Trump signed an executive order banning trans people from all public schools, forcing them to use the bathrooms, sports teams, and names that align with the gender they were assigned at birth. On January 31st, the Trump administration began removing all reference to gender from all government websites, deleting resources like CDC pages set up to help trans and non-binary youth, and State Department advice on traveling abroad while trans or non-binary. The same day, the Social Security Administration halted all sex ID changes. And on February 5th, Trump signed an executive order stopping trans girls and women from competing in sports. 4 out of the 10 brainiacs the New York Times platformed think that that's all just great. Another 3 think it's not great, but it's inconsequential. Megan K. Stack can't say it's exactly consequential since so few lives are materially affected. Okay, sure, the sports thing really stuck it to that one girl in Utah who wanted to play on the high school softball team, but according to Pew Research, trans and non-binary people make up at least 1.6% of the population, and that number may be in reality much higher due to how few people feel comfortable coming out as trans, considering, everything I just said, which explains why that poll also found that 5% of young people said their gender is different from their sex assigned at birth. But you know what? Let's just go with 1.6% of the population. That's how many trans people are in the United States. Guess how many people in Germany were Jewish in January of 1933? Less than 0.8%. Half. Were their lives inconsequential? And did the Nazis stop with them? Did no one at the New York Times ever learn that poem that starts, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist"? Survivors told us, never forget, never let it happen again. We have all of the information. When the first fascists started sig-hailing back in the day, everyone else didn't immediately know, oh, yep, that's a fascist. But we do know it now. They're Nazis. Elon even went out and got himself what we used to call the Hitler Youth haircut to really make it clear. I assume he's been toying around with new facial hair ideas too, like standing in his bathroom, looking in the mirror and trying to convincingly say, oh, it's all just a comedy act. In 1962, Kurt Vonnegut published Mother Night, a fictional memoir of an American spy who infiltrated the Nazis' propaganda wing, working his way up to the top in order to broadcast radio shows in which he would hide coded messages to the United States. Years after the end of the war, he's captured and put on trial for war crimes, and his contact in the U.S. War Department says, "Don't worry, I'm on my way to testify and tell them you were a double agent the entire time." But instead of waiting for that exoneration, the spy hangs himself for crimes against himself. In the introduction to the book, Vonnegut wrote, "This is the only story of mine whose moral I know. I don't think it's a marvelous moral. I simply happen to know what it is. We are what we pretend to be, so we must be careful about what we pretend to be." Think about it. Would you pretend to be a Nazi for any reason at all? Even professional actors wrestle with that idea, with many German and Austrian actors stating unequivocally that they will never play a Nazi, or they'll never play a Nazi again because the experience was so horrible, or they place certain limitations on what their character does as a Nazi and what comeuppance they get. And they are paid to make art. Who goes out on a public stage and acts like a Nazi for free with no co-stars, director, script, or comeuppance? Simple. A Nazi does. And with all of the bullshit executive orders and government ransacking that Trump and Musk have done, a lot of it does resemble what the Nazis did. But two areas are so precisely what the Nazis did and are so precisely the most dangerous things they did that it cannot be ignored. The threat to immigrants and the threat to transgender and non-binary people. We must reject the New York Times framing these people as inconsequential, and we must stand with them because it's the right thing to do. But if that's not enough for you, then know that if Trump and Musk are successful, they're going to come for you next. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.